Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Right. So the initial question that I asked when I was speaking in Marathi was, what do you think is the impact of scientific revolution on us? For example, people who really don't have anything to do with, let's say, Galileo or Newton or whatever else. We couldn't care less about the scientific discoveries and whatever they have discovered, the three laws of motion and all of that. But why do you think we are learning about these people in a paper which speaks about the intellectual history of the modern world? Even if it says West, it's modern world. The new title is modern world. So the pointed question is that what do you think is the role of these scientific revolutions in the mental makeup of us as human beings today in the 21st century? We will be dealing with these three people, Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton. So what's their impact on our thinking? Not because they discovered X or Y or Z, but what's their impact on our thinking? That's my question.
Ma'am, are we talking only about these three people, like these three revolutions, or scientific revolutions in general?
Scientific revolutions in general, and these three are only examples. There are many others who are, if not more, they are equally important. Like, for example, the discovery or the invention of the internet, for example. It's something that has revolutionized our thinking, not just world and gadgets and stuff, but thinking. So what's their impact on our thinking? Scientific revolutions in general.
We could take an example of how in the Middle Ages man had to repent because he was considered as sinful, and everything that wrong happened to him was because it was an act of God. But later on we did understand that superstitions thode far gele, and then we did understand that this is not act of God, but floods are not act of God. Everything happens for a reason. So we did understand that. So even COVID-19 is not an act of God.
Seditious. Okay. Anything else? Anything more? Your point is very well taken, Anushri. More seriously, that we have started thinking about the causes of events, phenomena that happen around us. We've started thinking about the causes beyond explanations which are rooted in religion, which are rooted in our faith. So instead of faith, we have moved on to what? From faith to
reason.
Excellent. Faith to reason. Something that explains that such and such thing happened, and therefore the dinosaurs are not here anymore. Such and such thing happened, and therefore whatever has happened. Cause and effect. Reason is nothing but the proportionate understanding of a cause and its effect. Proportionate understanding of a cause and its effect. So we have started thinking more rationally instead of thinking faithfully. That is one very important effect of scientific revolutions on our thinking today. Anything else?
Can you also say that scientific revolutions happened in त्याच्यामुळे there was world wars, there are battles all over, so it has led to us becoming more aggressive or increase in violence in human beings?
Maybe we can say, see, even the Bhimbetka people, they drew pictures about hunting. So violence has always been a part of human civilization, culture, so on and so forth. but the effect has grown manifold thanks to the technology. Can we say that?
Yes, yes.
So we have found more and more and more and more effective ways of being violent, being bad, and being good also in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Okay. Yes, that is also a very important fallout of the scientific revolutions. Intensity has increased tremendously. Like we used to earlier travel from one place to another. So think of the Bhimbetka painters. They would travel from one place to another in a day, maybe how many kilometers? 10 kilometers at the most. Think of the movie Ice Age, for example. You have to walk. And today, you can simply board a you can board a bullet train and reach somewhere in fantastic amounts of time, lesser and lesser amounts of time. Or you can even leave the orbit of the Earth and go into the space. So that has also, both ways, our capacities of destruction and capacities of constructive change have increased manifold. Yes, yes. Thanks to the scientific revolutions. What else? Can you think of something else also? Earlier in the Marathi lecture, it was discussed that thanks to the various inventions, we can share our thoughts very, very effectively these days. These days means over the periods of time. Earlier, maybe the Bhimbetka person would simply draw a picture and hope that somebody visits his cave or her cave. And then they come and appreciate their art, if it was art at all. But now, I tweet something and in an instant it reaches millions of people throughout the world. It reaches even somebody who's in the International Space Station, right? So our ability to communicate with others has also increased manifold. Yes. Nimisha?
The perspective kind of changed because the knowledge being shared, there are a lot of things that come into perspective about a single event. So maybe maybe I don't know, in the critical thinking part kind of got a boom.
Critical thinking, what?
First, because the perspective was kind of limited because you got information from what you were seeing visually, but because of the invention of printing press or the spread of knowledge, the exchange being fast and more effective, you kind of know things that you have not seen yourself, but you know them, so you think more critically about a certain event than you would have thought before the scientific revolution maybe.
And also we are bombarded with details which we don't need. Somebody eats something and they put the picture on Instagram, for example, is not something that I need, but still you get deluged with information which may be useful, which may not be useful also, right?
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to say, Nimisha?
Yeah, kind of, yes.
And also you were speaking about perspective. So first is amount of data, amount of information, and other is widening of perspective, because we can simply be in touch with many people's ideas at the same time. No?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Also with internet, I think there's a lot of influence on the perceptions that we get. So if I am supposed to go on Facebook tomorrow, I am going to see a number of posts which are to my liking, which are in accordance with my perception or the perception that they want me to think that I have. So even that has been happening. And I watch a lot of crime series, so this is something that even justice has been helped with scientific revolutions, because if there was no DNA, if there was no fingerprinting, many convicts, many people who are convicted today wouldn't have been convicted. So even that is something that has helped.
Yeah, scientific knowledge has tremendously brought about tremendous changes in our lives in general. So point here was that do you agree with the thought that scientific thinking is something that can be called as revolutionary, or do you think that revolutions are only when kings get killed and polity gets changed drastically? Or do you think that somebody comes like Copernicus and says, hey, it's not the earth, but it is the sun which is at the center of your solar system? Do you think that that can be legitimately termed as a revolution? That's the question. Whatever Copernicus has done, whatever Galileo has done, whatever Newton has done, we will be seeing, of course, whatever these guys have done. Do you think, okay, we can take this question later on. Do you think that these discoveries, if you like, their inventions, their contributions to the field of knowledge, do you think they can be legitimately termed as a revolution? Park the question in your minds. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we'll go one by one, and first we'll speak about what is it that can be said about the contribution of Nicolaus or Nikolai Copernicus, this person on the right side of the slide. What did he do? He kind of dethroned an idea and he enthroned another idea. What was the idea that was kind of delegitimized? You can see it superscribed here. What is the idea that he seems to have superscribed? He said this is wrong.
That Earth is at the center of the universe and not sun. So he overturned that fact. It was a fact till then, and then he replaced it with sun being at the center and Earth rotating around the sun, revolving around the sun.
Yeah. So Nicholas Copernicus says, what is replaced by what? Geocentrism. The idea that geo, that is the earth, is at the center of the universe. This idea gets superscribed, this idea gets removed. And what gets established because of Copernicus? Heliocentrism. Helios is? Helios?
Sun?
Yes, sun. Those of you who are avid readers of
Helium, I think.
Yeah, helium, helicopter, all those things, why are they going upwards? Because they are going towards the sun. Heliocentrism speaks about sun being at the center of not the entire universe, but of the solar system. So geocentrism, the idea of geocentrism got replaced by heliocentric views. Was Copernicus the first person to propound such an idea? No, he's not the only person. You have Copernicus being followed by Kepler, Galileo, Newton, eventually defended by Voltaire. But even before Copernicus, you will find there are many people, the Arab thinkers, there are people in the Indian subcontinent, there are people in the Chinese knowledge sphere who have contributed to such an idea that it's not the earth, but it is the sun which is at the center of the solar system. But why is it important for us to start with Copernicus? Primarily because, and this is the book that he has written, see, he has written a very methodical kind of account of why he thinks that it is the sun which is at the center of the solar system. This method, this way of expressing your ideas and continuing with the idea, continuing with the transfer of your knowledge is something that is revolutionary. In case of the Indian subcontinent, in case of the Chinese, what can you say, Chinese language, the books that were written in the Chinese language, or the world that knew the Chinese language, in all the, even the Arab world, in all these places, the cultures were such that ideas were not easily transferred from one person to another. Cultures were such that ideas were restricted. Transfer of knowledge is not something that was favorably encouraged, or it was not actively encouraged in these cultures. Whereas in case of Nicolaus Copernicus, one can see that even if, of course, all these people faced a great deal of criticism, we'll see with the example of Galileo also, but in case of these scientific thinkers, as far as Europe is concerned, though there was a great deal of criticism, though there was a great deal of opposition to their ideas, the ideas survived because the society in general favored exchange of ideas. Not just favored does not mean it was culturally programmed to accept each other's ideas. There was technical know-how, there was, as somebody rightly pointed out earlier in the Marathi lecture, there was this technology of printing which was available for them to easily exchange their ideas. But all these factors come together, and then the result that we have is this fantastic book that is written by Copernicus, which speaks about the revolutions of celestial orbs, the heavenly bodies, revolutions, that is the movement of heavenly bodies. What happened because of this contribution made by Copernicus? It kind of acts as a shaker. It kind of wakes people out of their slumber, wherein people were earlier believing that we are at the center of the universe, Earth being the center of the whole system. And then we as human beings are the most kind of chosen race, or chosen whatever, of creation of God. So there was a great deal of confidence. There was a great deal of, what do you call it? Confidence, I think is the right word. Great deal of confidence and self-righteousness, if you like, as far as human thinking was concerned, which got suddenly shaken up with a rude shock, as it were, because of Copernicus, who says that you guys are not at the center of the universe. It's the sun, and you, among many others, are simply revolving and rotating around these stars. So the reassurances of the cosmology of the Middle Ages were gone. Suddenly people felt that, oh, we are not at the center of this whole exercise that is happening. The comfort zone was shaken up. Then, following Copernicus, we have this person called as a scientist, of course, called as Tycho Brahe. What does he do? He makes observations, records them, makes further observations, records them at regular intervals, and as a result of these continued observations, he ends up discovering comets and stars, because constantly he is recording his observations and tallying them with the tallying the records with the new observations, because of which he ends up with great discoveries, and he publishes whatever he has discovered. So this idea of knowledge sharing is something that is very important for us. the exact discovery of Tycho Brahe, maybe you will remember, you will not remember at the time of your examination. But it's important for us to remember that these guys are doing things in a methodical fashion, recording them and sharing their knowledge with others, which is something that is a unique and killer combination, if you like. Earlier, it was not easily available for other people if somebody had made a discovery, because knowledge sharing practices were not so rooted in societies. Whereas in the 16th century, Tycho Brahe writes, publishes. 16th and 17th century witnesses yet another bright mind, Johannes Kepler, who, what does he do? Establishes that the planets are not moving in an exactly circular, and you can see that he has a divider in his hands in the portrait that we have here on the right side, bottom of the slide. So Kepler proves that the planets move not in an exactly circular fashion, but they move in an elliptical motion. Elliptical is elongated circles. Elongated circles. Okay. Here we have a picture and yet another picture with left to right are Aristotle, Ptolemy, Copernicus, here in the right side picture. Aristotle, Ptolemy and Copernicus with a little toy-like thing in his hands, which is nothing but a planet orbiting sun and its model, a model of the here, a model of the planets orbiting the sun at the center. Copernicus is carrying that in his hands. So Kepler proves that planets move in an elliptical fashion, in an elliptical motion. And then we come to Galileo Galilei, who besides many other things, he discovers a number of things, but one of his most important ideas is that the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. He has this tremendous attitude of confidence as far as the human mind is concerned. A true humanist, if you like, a true Renaissance person. Galileo Galilei, besides being many other things, is a person who is an inventor of the telescope. And he says that there are many secrets in this nature. Why are plants green? Why do the roots move in, grow in a certain direction? Why is it that for example, an apple tree, why doesn't it give a pear as the fruit? All these laws are waiting there, out there to be discovered by the human mind. So he has this tremendous confidence in the potential of the human mind to unravel the mysteries of nature. And hence he says that the book of nature is written in the language of mathematics. Mathematics here does not mean only 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. It means philosophy in its purest form. So he says that one can understand nature provided we apply our human mind to it. Galileo, of course, his major contribution is he starts experimenting. No, it's not as if he's the person who has begun the process of experimenting. Man has been experimenting throughout his life. But what he does is he gives a certain amount of recognition to experimentation as a method for discovering nature. So he says that there are many methods. One can simply have an epiphany. One can simply have a realization, sudden realization also. And that can also lead to knowledge. But he says, if we experiment, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? And this kind of an experimentation and the observation and the repetition and the recording and the knowledge sharing if we do this, then we can discover a number of facts about nature. So basically what Galileo is trying to do is trying to give validity, trying to give dignity, trying to give legitimacy to the ability of the human beings to observe, record, and understand nature. This is where I think we'll stop, only with the last point that all of these things, his revolutionary kind of thinking, resulted in a process of inquisition against Galileo Galilei. In the last lecture itself, we saw what is an inquisition. So the moment Galileo says that, yes, I stand by all these people before me, Kepler and Copernicus and all those people who are saying that Earth is not at the center of the solar system, but it is only one of the many planets who are moving around the sun, which is at the center. So this revolutionary idea, which was not put forth but advocated by Galileo, resulted in him facing the Inquisition. We'll stop here and continue in our lecture tomorrow. Tomorrow is what? What's the date tomorrow?
17th?
17th. Now?
Yeah.
Tomorrow I have a Viva at 11.